Welcome to this explainer. You know, for decades, we've basically been told that sleep health is just a simple math equation. Count your hours, hit that magic number of 8, and you're good to go, right? Well, today, we're going to radically shift that paradigm. When we actually integrate the latest research across chronobiology, neuroscience, and endocrinology, a much deeper, much higher stakes story emerges. We're diving way past the basic advice to deconstruct the profound molecular mechanisms of your biological clocks, and we'll see exactly how your sleep architecture literally dictates your lifespan, your cellular repair, and your systemic survival. So here's a wild thought. Is sleep regularity actually more important than sleep duration for your overall longevity? I know, it feels completely counterintuitive. Historically, we've only ever prioritized total sleep volume, but modern geroscience is revealing a massive paradigm shift. The data strongly suggests that the day-to-day consistency of your biological clock is actually a superior predictor of your survival. It's not just about how long you're asleep, it's about whether your genetically programmed cellular rhythms are getting the precise timing they biologically expect. Scientists actually measure this using something called the Sleep Regularity Index, or SRI. It basically calculates the probability of you being in the exact same state, either asleep or awake, at any two times separated by exactly 24 hours. And the sheer magnitude of the survival advantage here is absolutely stunning. Even when controlling for sleep duration, individuals in the highest SRI percentiles see a massive reduction in all-cause mortality, with a hazard ratio dropping as low as 0.54. To put that into perspective, that's nearly cutting your mortality risk in half. Why? Because the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the master pacemaker in your brain, has to synchronize autonomous clocks in every single tissue of your body. Irregular sleep forces your cells into chronic, exhausting circadian dyssynchrony. All right, let's dive into Section 1, Metabolic Chaos and Insulin Resistance. Metabolic chaos kicks in with terrifying speed. Short-term sleep restriction doesn't just make you tired, it acts as a severe physical stressor. If healthy, lean adults are restricted to just 4.5 hours of sleep for only 4 consecutive nights, their whole body insulin sensitivity drops by 16%. But it gets worse. When you look localized at the cellular level, the insulin sensitivity of their subcutaneous fat cells plummets by a staggering 30%. In under a week, lack of sleep literally forces a perfectly healthy person's fat cells to mimic those of an obese or severely diabetic patient. Let's actually trace the exact molecular domino effect of how this happens. First, sleep restriction hyperactivates your sympathetic nervous system. That's your classic fight-or-flight response. This triggers a sustained release of norepinephrine, which totally disrupts the normal insulin signaling cascade at the cellular level. Specifically, it completely suppresses the phosphorylation of the AKT kinase. And because this kinase fails to activate, the GLUT4 vesicles remain trapped inside the cell. They cannot move to the membrane. The cellular door is literally locked shut against glucose. That right there is the biological ground zero of sleep-deprived insulin resistance. And as you might guess, that cellular blockade ripples out into absolute systemic hormonal chaos. When you're sleep-deprived, cortisol doesn't just peak in the morning like it's supposed to, it stays elevated all day long, driving up blood glucose and pushing your HPA axis into serious overdrive. Simultaneously, your appetite hormones go entirely rogue. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, spikes. Leptin, the satiety hormone, crashes. You are molecularly programmed to overeat, all while your cells are actively rejecting the glucose you're consuming. It's basically a perfect self-perpetuating metabolic storm. Moving right along to Section 2, the glymphatic brainwashing system. So it turns out that literal brainwashing is a highly critical biological requirement. The glymphatic system is this incredibly specialized fluid network inside your skull. It relies on astrocytic and feet, these protective barriers around your blood vessels that contain highly specific water channels called aquaporin 4. This entire system essentially acts as a hydraulic pump, powerfully driving cerebral spinal fluid deep into your brain tissue to exchange with interstitial fluid. It is literally power washing away the neurotoxic metabolic waste that inevitably accumulates just from you being awake. But here is the catch. The timing of this power wash is incredibly specific. It operates almost exclusively during stage 3 deep sleep, heavily driven by the slow wave activity of non-rapid eye movement sleep. And during this phase, something absolutely incredible happens. The extracellular space around your brain cells physically expands by 60%. Your brain essentially shrinks to allow a massive rush of fluid to flush out amyloid beta and tau, which are the exact proteins responsible for Alzheimer's disease. But this fragile system is heavily impaired by shift work, sleep deprivation, and aging. Without deep slow wave sleep, your brain simply cannot take out the trash. Which brings us perfectly into Section 3, DNA repair and cellular aging.
To truly grasp the stakes here, we need to zoom way in, past the cell membrane right into the nucleus. Double-strand breaks in your DNA are the most dangerous form of genomic damage you can experience. They're capable of causing nasty mutations, cellular death, or even cancer. Enter sirtuin-6, or SIRT-6. It is your genome's ultimate first responder. It acts as a hypervigilant biological sensor, arriving at the exact site of a double-strand break within 5 seconds to physically cap the broken DNA ends and kickstart repair. 5 seconds. And its efficiency is completely controlled by your sleep-wake cycle.
We are actually facing a brutal evolutionary trade-off here. Simply being conscious comes at a cost. During wakefulness, your normal metabolic processes inevitably generate reactive oxygen species. This oxidative stress causes a steady, relentless accumulation of double-strand DNA breaks in your neurons. Basically, just being awake puts you in a state of accumulating low-grade brain damage. But during sleep, the cellular environment completely shifts. Chromosomal dynamics in individual neurons ramp up, vastly enhancing the cell's ability to search for matching DNA sequences. SIRT6 activates and recruits repair enzymes to fix the damage, a life-saving process that's heavily reliant on NAD+, which, by the way, gets rapidly depleted if you are chronically sleep-deprived. And when we fail to repair that DNA damage, we hit the fast-forward button on cellular aging. This brings us to telomeres, the protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes. The absolute latest research reveals that we really need to watch the percentage of our critically short telomeres. Over a study period of just 18 months, individuals with poor sleep efficiency showed a highly significant increase in these depleted caps, and even a tiny fraction of these critically short telomeres can trigger irreversible cellular senescence, turning the cell into a zombie-like state where it just sits there, secreting a highly toxic, pro-inflammatory soup into all your surrounding tissue. And that toxic soup leads us right into Section 4, immune regulation and the nervous system. That cellular zombie state directly drives what scientists are now calling inflammaging. Chronic sleep loss chronically activates your sympathetic nervous system. All that excess norepinephrine physically binds to adrenergic receptors on your immune cells. This activates specific pattern recognition receptors, particularly toll-like receptor 4, which then violently forces a transcription factor called NF-kappa B to migrate directly into the cell nucleus. Once it's in there, it forcefully drives the aggressive expression of pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha. A disrupted circadian rhythm literally hardwires your immune system to remain in a chronic, low-grade inflammatory state. But conversely, when the system functions the way it's supposed to, biology completely works in our favor. During healthy early nocturnal sleep, there is a profound drop in stress hormones. This hormonal dip acts as a massive biological all-clear signal. It releases naive T cells from circulation, allowing them to migrate directly into your lymph nodes. And it's here that they are exposed to novel antigens to form long-lasting immunological memory. This is exactly why getting deep sleep the night after receiving a vaccine produces a drastically stronger antibody response. Sleep is quite literally the physical architect of your adaptive immunity. All right, let's get practical in Section 5, optimizing your sleep architecture. Knowing the sheer molecular stakes we're up against, how do we actually fix this? First, you absolutely must prioritize your sleep regularity index. Anchor your bed and wake times every single day to synchronize those peripheral tissue clocks we talked about. If insomnia is a serious barrier for you, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, still remains the absolute clinical gold standard. Also, keep in mind that aerobic exercise mechanically boosts that lymphatic cerebral spinal flow we discussed. You'll want to ensure a cool, pitch-dark environment and definitively halt all caffeine at least 8 hours before bed. Finally, if you need a biochemical nudge, the data suggests a microdose of melatonin, just 1 to 2 milligrams, exactly 2 hours before bed. At that low of a dose, it acts as a highly precise chronobiological signal to your brain's master clock, rather than just acting as a blunt sedative. Which brings us to a final and honestly highly necessary question to wrap up this explainer. If every single cell in your body relies on the circadian clock to repair its DNA, flush out neurotoxins, and regulate systemic inflammation, are you treating your sleep schedule as an optional luxury or a strict biological necessity? Understanding the true mechanics of chronobiology literally changes everything. It's no longer just about waking up feeling rested, it is about providing your genome with the exact daily environment it fundamentally requires to survive. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. It is officially time to take absolute ownership of your circadian health.